I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and today's video isn't anything too fancy in terms of production. Think of it as an introduction to anyone who might be new to the subject matter. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's begin. In the early 2000s, collectible miniature games were the latest gaming trend. It was basically the same concept as collectible card games, only instead of buying a pack of cards, you got a box of tiny pre-painted miniatures, but thanks to the blind boxing, you never knew what you actually got until you opened it. Assuming you waited until you got home and didn't just break into the box in the store first. Quite a few of these games used licensed properties, such as HeroClix and Star Wars miniatures, but there were also plenty of games that featured original concepts. Straddling the line between original and licensed was a little game called Monsterpocalypse from Privateer Press, a company whose initials are sure to induce a chuckle. Monsterpocalypse was the only game in the genre that featured kaiju as a primary focus, and it had effort put into giving it a backstory and established world. Plus, kaiju were still a novelty at the time, so kaiju fans who were looking for a new hobby or longtime gamers who were looking for something different leapt on it instantly. Despite not technically licensing any pre-existing characters, the game leaned heavily into homage, with most of the factions standing in for some recognizable franchise. There was a Godzilla faction, a King Kong faction, an Ultraman faction. There was even a Cthulhu faction. Yeah, everyone's treating the question of whether or not Cthulhu is a kaiju as something new, but here Privateer Press had decided he was years ago, and nobody disagreed. The format, scale, and rules for Monsterpocalypse even served as the basis for an officially licensed game based on Voltron, which made the two games 100% compatible. How popular was Monsterpocalypse in its heyday, you may ask? Well, it had a limited comic book series to flesh out the backstory that remains a cult favorite. Tim Burton was once attached to make a film adaptation for DreamWorks, this was back before Tim Burton gave up, and conventions devoted exclusively to the game were held in Oklahoma until 2012. Yeah, this game was a pretty big deal for a while. However, all good things must come to an end. The bubble for collectible minigames eventually burst, and even though HeroClix managed to hang on for a while by steering away from the randomized format, most of the others faded away, Monsterpocalypse among them. Side note, I was listening to music as I wrote this, and Goodbye Old Friend from Godzilla King of the Monsters started playing at the exact moment I typed that. Talk about serendipity, right? Privateer Press shifted focus towards its hobby wargaming titles so as to compete with Games Workshop, whose Warhammer franchise was beginning a second renaissance thanks to social media. In the years ahead, the company would mostly be known for the steampunk title War Machine and its fantasy sister series Hordes. During this time, Monsterpocalypse remained popular among its established fanbase, who kept it alive purely through enthusiasm and nostalgia even though nothing new was being produced. However, something significant happened during that extended absence. Kaiju made a comeback in the popular culture. Thanks to Pacific Rim's Shin Godzilla and the first 2 entries of what became the Monsterverse, giant monsters had gone from direct-to-video schlock to high-quality blockbusters, and this was despite the 2-decade dominance of superheroes still going strong. Someone at Privateer Press decided that the time had come. In 2018, Monsterpocalypse was relaunched in a brand new format. The game was totally revamped, with new rules, more variety of units, larger models that came unpainted so they could be customized, and best of all, no more blind boxing. These changes were incompatible with the original game, which I'm sure annoyed a lot of veteran players, but such is the way of things sometimes. Actually, as a quick aside, I know lots of people have been leaving the Warhammer community after Games Workshop made a series of decisions that alienated the fanbase. Most people have gone to BattleTech as an alternative, and understandably so, BattleTech is cool. Still, I'd like to propose that Monsterpocalypse is another good alternative. First of all, it's one of the more affordable hobby games on the market. Most models average between $30 to $40, with none so far getting anywhere close to the hundreds. Sure, you might still spend about $150 building up a particular army, but that amount would get you a complete army to play with, as opposed to Warhammer, where you can spend the same amount and still not even have a quarter of what you need. Second, you don't need to pick only one faction. Warhammer fans have devoted hours of content to explaining that newcomers have to be very selective when picking a faction. You have to find something that appeals to you in aesthetics, lore, and gameplay, or else you're likely going to lose interest and you can't really mix armies without messing up the synergy. With Monsterpocalypse, however, the only choice you have to make is if you want to play as protectors or destroyers. Once you've made that choice, you can mix and match any factions on that side. Can't decide between Tritons, Guard, or the Pterosaurs? You don't have to, just get them all. Do you like the monsters from the Planet Eaters but prefer the units from the Martian Menace? That's your army. Want to lean into the homage and make a kaiju lineup you always wanted to see in the movies? Nothing is stopping you. This isn't a sponsorship or anything, I just think anyone looking for an alternative ought to consider this as a possibility. Anyway, this new take on Monsterpocalypse was met with open arms, and not only has every old faction made its way back, minus Voltron, sorry folks, but we've also gotten a boatload of new factions that add even more variety to the world and gameplay. This version is still going strong today, but another major change is on the horizon. While hobby games aren't going anywhere, board games are currently seeing their own resurgence. Quite a few, in fact, are adopting the more intricate gameplay and storytelling elements of hobby games. The big difference is that barring the occasional expansion pack, these games are self-contained and provide everything you need for a complete experience. Privateer Press has clearly taken notice of this, so now a third iteration of Monsterpocalypse is on the horizon. Working with MythicGames, the company behind games like Reichbusters, Steam Watchers, and the Solomon Kane board game, a Monsterpocalypse board game is set to arrive in 2022. Despite being designed for newcomers, it's compatible with the recent relaunch because you don't want to alienate the fan base a second time. It also introduces new elements like the Apex Kaiju and can even be played solo if you're a lonely, pathetic schlub like me. Just to show you how devoted this game's fanbase is, the Kickstarter for it was fully backed only a few hours after it was launched, and it never let up. Yes, I was among those initial backers. Yes, I'm feeling it in my wallet. No, I don't regret it because I've wanted to get into this game for years anyway. You might also be wondering, whatever happened to that movie adaptation I mentioned? Well, obviously DreamWorks never made it. The official reason is because they felt the concept was too similar to Pacific Rim, but I have a hard time believing that. First of all, Pacific Rim was a popular film that reignited the kaiju genre in the mainstream, and when something is popular like that, it's more likely for studios to move forward with similar projects rather than scrap them. Second, and more significantly, how the heck is Monsterpocalypse too similar to Pacific Rim? It has a completely different setting, aesthetic, and variety of entities populating it. The only way the two are at all similar is because they both feature giant piloted mecha and giant alien monsters, which is such a superficial detail to get hung up on that you may as well argue Marvel never should have made an Iron Man movie because we already had Batman movies, and since they're both superheroes, they're basically the exact same thing, right? Personally, I think Pacific Rim is just being scapegoated because nobody involved in that original production will cop to getting cold feet. However, Warner Brothers acquired the movie rights for itself back in 2016, this time with Fede Alvarez attached. Between the successful relaunch of the game and Warner's recent success with the Monsterverse, who knows? I'm not holding my breath, but a movie could still happen at some point. That's just a history of the game itself, of course. If you guys are interested, I can do more videos about Monsterpocalypse in the future, but for now I've said all I want to say, and I'm ready to move on to the next big project. I'm looking forward to getting in on this, and as long as neither Privateer nor Mythic do something like Games Workshop did to drive people away, I think I'll be sticking with it for a long time. Oh, and in case anyone is suspicious, no, I did not have this game in mind when I wrote about the kaiju armies in Operation Red Dragon. That's just a coincidence. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.